In October, Jeremy and Trish and I had an opportunity to meet. I had met Trish at an event, and I presented to her a concept called learning loops that we had been developing through the Serendipity Center for Informal Learning. My name is KellyAnn Bonnel, and I am with the Serendipity Center for Informal Learning. And what we do is best practices in educational reform, focusing on out-of-the-box kinds of learning experiences. So what we're working on are some of the things that many of you may be working on. Jeremy with Bonanza is doing after-school enrichment programs. Some of you are doing some really incredibly innovative kinds of things with kids and youth. What we discovered was the work that we were doing in that space had some really awesome applications to workforce development, and in particular, how we capture learning that our employees are doing as part of our professional development window. And so today I want to present to you an introduction to learning loops for professional development. For reference in education, we just refer to it as PD, so definition right now, PD is professional development. If I lapse into that, that's where we're at. From a professional development standpoint, I'm going to guess you do orientation. Oh, this is not cooperating. Workshops, training, and conferences. So those would be things that you, what other kinds of things do you do with your employees for training? Okay, so videos would be part of that?
On the job stuff.
Okay.
Actually, like hands-on.
So shadowing and mentoring and things like that. What else? Okay. Books, okay. So one of the things that happens with all these things that we've talked about are that they fall right in the middle of a learning hierarchy that encompasses a variety of things. And it makes it very microscopic when our employees are focused. And for us, it's focused. What we know is that when these are the areas that we focus on, we are losing 70% of the learning that is capable of our employees. So when we talk about reading, workshops, mentoring, shadowing, all of those things within the structure, we're addressing 30–35% of professional development for our employees. Where do you think the rest of it comes from?
When they're actually doing something.
When they're actually doing something? Anyplace else?
They have a chance to make mistakes and learn from it.
They have a chance to make mistakes and learn from it.
And so experience.
Experience. What's Gangplank all about?
Facilitating interaction.
Facilitating interactions. A huge component, in fact, we were just having a conversation about the fact that home can be really isolating. Gangplank is all about the facilitating of interactions to build more creativity and ideas. And it's in that arena that we lose our ability to document time. Now, in a space like this that's committed to shared learning, you know up front that people benefit from those water cooler conversations. You're here because people benefit from those water cooler conversations. A lot of companies don't have that opportunity. People linger at somebody's desk, oh, I've got to get back to work, as if what they were doing wasn't work. But those connections are important, and it's in those connections and relationships that we build affinity spaces. Like-minded people come together, and that's where the majority of your staff learning comes from. So when we break it down, we look at 3 categories. We have formal learning, which is your degrees, your university certificates, your Microsoft certifications. It's all very formalized. You attend a certain number of hours, you take a test, you get a nationally or internationally recognized document for it. That's easy. That's usually the stuff that when you're looking for employees, you are able to say, Okay, we must have a bachelor's degree. We must have Microsoft certification. Much along the same lines as you need a fingerprint clearance card, or you need, your first aid CPR. Those things are things that we tend to put in our job requirements. You need to walk in the door with those before we're even going to have a conversation. The second place that we look is the non-formal place, and that is what I'm doing today. I am an authority on this topic coming to you to share. There's a training certificate that goes with it, but there's no certification. You can take all of those certificates from conferences and those mini workshops and things like that, and you can amass them in a file. Teachers have to have 70 hours. Daycare workers have to have 30 hours. Everybody's got a different time frame for what that PD looks like. And again, that's easily documented. But again, that's only 30% or 35% of where people are learning. What I like to ask entrepreneurs is, when was the last time you took a class to learn something you needed to do for your business? I see a head shaking no here.
College.
Okay, college, way back when, right? Now, I want you to think about the last thing you had to teach yourself. What was it, and how did you learn it?
I did generation for product development generation. I just found videos and looked it up on the internet.
Okay, so you self-guided it. You didn't know what you didn't know, so you started somewhere. At some point in time, you probably went off on a rabbit trail you never expected because you thought it was going to go this way because you didn't know what you didn't know, and all of a sudden now you knew a little bit, and you moved forward with that. There's no place to put that on your resume, is there? Because there's no way to document it. And what Learning Loops allows us to do is, for you as entrepreneurs or for you as employers or employees with supervisors, it gives you an opportunity to document this process of rabbit trail learning, the self-taught stuff. Now, the reason it's so hard is because you don't know what you don't know. And so how do I even know where to start if I have no idea where I'm going? Well, that's the whole principle behind Learning Loops, and it's what we're doing in classrooms with kids on a regular basis. We're asking them to plan out what it is they think they want to do, and then to try it, and then to review it and see if they got the result that they wanted, and then to modify their plan again and move forward. We do it in engineering with kids, we do it in science with kids, we even do it in reading and creative writing with kids. But somewhere along the line, we stopped doing it when we hit college or adulthood. And the reality is that method allows us to really embrace this process that we're going through. So the cornerstone of the Learning Loop is plan, do, and review. So from a planning standpoint, this is both an employer, so you as the corporate entity and you as the employee have to take this very seriously. So the first thing is that you as a company have to identify what are the skills that you want your organization to gain this year. So I have a client, Science Matters, that I'm developing after-school programming for, and number one skill quality that we are working on this year is marketing. It doesn't matter what state we walk into, every one of their program managers firmly admits we suck at marketing. Well, it's great to know you suck at it. How do you get better at it? Is it, and so then you as a corporation have to make some decisions. Are we going to hire outside consultants, or are we going to train our people internally? And then you have to break it down to an individual employee and what that looks like. And that's where your employee review comes in. Sitting down, there's going to be a real difference between what Trish knows about marketing and what Jeremy knows about marketing and what I know about marketing. If we're all working for Science Matters and we all know that we're terrible at it, it still doesn't mean that we're all terrible at the same aspect of it. And so part of it is taking that ownership and understanding where the individual piece is in that. But then you got to let it go. You have to let the employee take that process. Once you've identified that this is something you're going to do and you've put it on your employee review plan that I'm going to work with Trish on marketing this year, usually that's as far as it goes, right? We say, okay, we'll revisit in 6 months and go to a marketing workshop. And that's kind of how professional development is typically done. Whereas with this model, I then sit down with Trish and say, okay, we've made that decision. Where do you want to start, Trish? And Trish has to think about, I know nothing. I don't even know where to start. Well, why don't we start with reading some marketing journal and see, journal articles and see where we can go with that. And maybe from there, you're able to set a plan. So it might not even be when you identify that first step that you're able to put a plan in action. Part of your plan may be, I don't know what I don't know. I got to go find out what I don't know so I can identify it. But it's that meta step of recognizing that it's okay and that we have the skills. Even when we don't know what we don't know, we have a skill set that can allow us to identify what we don't know to set a plan in place. So from a do standpoint, I then turn it over to, I'm picking on Trish, so I then turn it over to Trish and let Trish do her preliminary and come up with a task and timeline. I'm certain all of you are familiar with tasks and timelines. It doesn't matter whether we're in IT or education or quality improvement or what we're in. There's a task and timeline piece. If I create it, there isn't any buy-in for Trish. Trish has got to guide that herself because it's got to guide her passion and her interest in whatever that issue is to be able to move forward with it. And this is something that Jeremy and I had a conversation when we first met, and we were talking about after-school staff. And the fact that my philosophy with after-school staff is I'm lucky if I have them for 2 years and I want their wings to go and be off wherever. And so part of what I need to do in their professional development is recognize the fact that I'm saying goodbye to them. So let me help them be the best person they can be, as well, and follow whatever that individual goal is, as well as helping my corporation. So again, using Trish as my example, if Trish were my after-school teacher, one of the first questions that I'd be asking her is, okay, tell me where you really want to be in 5 years. Don't tell me that you want to be here doing this part-time job in 5 years. Tell me where you really want to be. And then having that real conversation so that I can then identify the skill sets that I need for her to have, that she needs for all jobs in supporting that soft skills development, as well as whatever I need in my corporation. We sometimes get really hung up on, well, if it doesn't fit my puzzle piece for what my company needs, it's not beneficial. Think about the fact that Intel and Microsoft are spending millions of dollars a year on soft skills development for their employees. If you allow an employee to go on a rabbit trail that might not directly relate to your company, you can help them gain some of those soft skills that you might not be able to get just by putting them through the training you need them to go through. So an example for that might be, hello, my name is KellyAnn and I'm a compulsive volunteer. I'm gaining a lot of skills in my volunteer world that have some really concrete applications in my work world, but did my employer give me an opportunity to share and document that experience and show the benefit as I was doing it? Make sense? So the last step is review, and there's 2 steps in the review process. The first is the reviewing, I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I know this, and I need to change my plan. And then the second step in review is the final step. And this is where this comes in. This is where the brown bag kind of thing comes in. Because one of the things that those of us that are teachers know is that you learn it better when you teach it. And so it's taking that lesson from TED Talks and Ignite Phoenix and all of the places that are encouraging the sharing of great ideas. And it's saying, if you've taken the time to go on a journey to learn something, share it with the world. Because when you share it with the world, aha moments will happen that didn't happen before. And that becomes the closure of the learning loop. So at its base core, it's plan, do, review. Any questions? Okay.
The review is not an internal review. Review is an external public review.
It is both. It is, at one level, it is the internal review as you're learning about the process of, I needed to learn marketing and I went off on a crowdsourcing thing that made no sense and I became an expert in crowdsourcing, but that's not what I needed. So I need to reframe my task and timeline and say, that really wasn't what I was looking at. And so I need to bring that in. But then review is also on the other side. In some workspaces, we call it a thesis project. And in fact, when I'm doing things with my arts teachers in the West Valley, the conversation that I have with them isn't, it's more of a, okay, your job is to create a thesis project on whatever you want to, whatever you're passionate about to share with your peers, and then they share those pieces. So it's going to have a lot of different terms, just like the TED Talk piece does, and just like, we call them share fests at the Sills. So it just kind of depends. Because this was created for kids and then emerged into the adult workplace because we saw that application for it, those names are gonna evolve. But the philosophy is the same. It's the two different pieces. In order for this to work, employers have to embrace the entire philosophy of it. And that means that there needs to be time and there needs to be space for employees to pursue informal learning in the way that they pursue informal learning. Some people are readers. Are you giving them downtime? And is it okay in your corporate culture for them to be reading a magazine article or a novel when they're not on the phone or they're not working on a project? Or is that perceived as being a waste of time? Are you creating professional learning communities where your staff are able to come together and brainstorm and talk about the things that they struggle with? Obviously, TED as an innovator is really good at this, and part of the TED Ed Clubs piece is a Facebook group that I'm on. And so whenever I need to celebrate or I have a question, since we're all over the world, we're able to go to a Facebook page and that's where we share. And I find that with my after-school teachers that are from one end of the valley to the other, the best way for me to have them share is in group emails. They don't like the Facebook. They want to just have an email and they reply all, and they're happy with that. My Buckeye Elementary arts teachers want to meet once a month for 2 hours, and that's their touch base. So again, every staff is going to be different. Every company is going to be different in the way that professional learning community looks. The keys to the professional learning community is it's not professional development. And what I mean by that is it's not the workshop training time. This is the time where they self-guide and they brainstorm and they connect and they decide what outcomes they want from their group. And they guide that. And then of course resources, Gangplank again is the beautiful embodiment of this, in that you're already a shared work environment that fosters dialogue across companies. You've already got a library, you've got quiet spaces where employees can have downtime. We recognize, the companies that come to a space like this recognize that that programmer is going to solve whatever his glitch is sitting in front of one of the computer games. We get that. The question then is, how do we then spread that message? So, we talked a little bit about the setting of the goals in the plan, and I talked a little bit about that last time. So remember that for an employee, as you are the manager, that you're wanting to not only look at your company goals, but really focus on those employee goals. Support the aspirational goal. I restructured a Head Start about 3 years ago, and I had a young teacher assistant who'd been with me for 5 years, and I knew she wouldn't be with me much longer. Those early childhood and after-school environments are high turnover spaces. People are usually in them while they're working on a degree. And I was really surprised to discover that the degree that she was interested in wasn't in education. She wanted to be in law enforcement. Well, then it was my challenge to figure out how to help her meet the requirements for the police academy, working with 4-year-olds. Likewise, you'll see some, and where does this really lend in reality to the crossover? Well, a really good example, my husband is formerly a C-level software executive who has 25 product releases under his belt in about 15 years. And he decided to go into film. And guess what? Project management for a film is the identical process as it is to develop software. And so those skills do translate. Now, would the film industry ask for a Microsoft certified professional in ABC? Probably not. The fact that he can pick up Microsoft and call them and have a conversation, his colleagues really like, because they're able to, so again, those connections don't go away when you cross industries. So what are those aspirational goals? I'm mentoring a young artist right now who is really learning how to sell his art. And we thought, you'll get a real kick out of this one. We were actually, he was doing cardboard recyclables, and we were on the market for him to be a children's space art teaching artist. And lo and behold, the adult community got a hold of it and fell in love with it. And he's going, I can't do both of these. And I looked at him and I said, which one's going to make you more money? And that was, that's the direction that we went. And so again, it's that we're off on this track and it's making a lot of sense. And all of a sudden, something we didn't think about or something that we didn't know retracked our professional development the whole bit, and so now we're exploring a whole host of different materials. So those are the kinds of things that you want to be really conscious of as an employer. From the task and timeline, make the space, make the employee, allow the employee to really share that learning loop. Let them take ownership of it. Again, some of you have been managers of multiple employees for many years, and oh my gosh, it's employee review time. I'm going to fill out the paperwork. We're going to sign it. We're not going to look at those goals again until I have to do another employee review. I don't have the time. I have way too much on my plate. This gives you that opportunity to have the employee own it, or in your case, if you are an independent contractor, for you to own and document your pieces. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the documentation, because some of you are not going to use this for employees, you're going to be using it for yourself. How do you document the time that you are spending on your informal learning journey that allows us to be able to translate it into a certificate that you can put on your resume? Okay, the tools that you're going to need are some form of reflection journal. Nobody cares what that is. It could be electronic, it could be paper, it could be, you want to carve it in stone, go for it. The issue here is that you have taken the time to document your learning journey. So if it is, from a management standpoint, I like a composition notebook where I can give notes back to my employees, or a blog that I can respond to, or something like that. If you're doing it for yourself, you're just going to be documenting. Today I attended the Intro to Learning Loops. This is what I thought about it. I thought it was a lot of bunk. I liked these ideas. Whatever those thought processes are, is what you want to be putting down with it. Is it something you write every day? No, we're not turning you into a 15-year-old girl. If you want to, that's awesome, but you don't have to. I don't expect to see any My Pretty Ponies and feathered pencils. So again, it's just that opportunity for you to have a place to document. Some people like to do it publicly. Some people will use their professional blog as their piece. And so when they then come to the third party to create the documentation certificate that says, I have indeed invested this many hours in this topic, well, where's your documentation for that? Oh, please visit the blog I've been doing for 4 years. The second thing you're going to need is an annotated bibliography. Now, those of you that went to college remember these monstrosities in APA style with all of the, it has to be, there needs to be the extra space in between, and it has to be put up this way, and you have to have the publisher. Yeah, no. Again, this is for you to use as a reference and to prove to that third party that you've done the work that you claim to have done. And so as you read a book, as you watch a training video, as you watch a show that has an impact on what you're doing, I mean, heavens, with John and I in film, everything I'm doing, every time I watch a television show, it counts as professional development for me if I want it to. Do I document all that? Absolutely not. Could I? Yes. So those things that strike you, that put you in disequilibrium, that make you question your status quo, or that validate your status quo and you go, yeah, I knew that all along and here's the proof I needed. Those are the things that you're going to put in your annotated bibliography. This isn't something you're really, unless you want to turn it over to a third party for that confirmation certification for your resume, it's really just there for you. I tell my freshmen in community college to do this. Every time you write a paper, write a little blurb about everything you read. That way you don't have to read it a second time your senior year. So again, it's just creating that go-to resource. Where I see this being of great benefit for Gangplank in particular is if Trish reads a really great book, and I believe you were saying you're doing a journey on several books, or you were, right? Kind of? Yeah. When you read that, yeah.
I made a goal for 2014 to read 60 books.
Okay, that's what I was remembering. Okay. So now, if Trish did something like this for each one of the books, that would deter her 60-book goal, but let's just hypothetically say she was Superwoman and had 48 hours in a day. Then what could happen is that bibliography could go into the library with the books. And when Jeremy was looking for a book, or what's your name? Or Eileen was looking for a book on a particular topic, she might be able to thumb through it, and because somebody she knew had given her a brief synopsis rather than the description on the back, it might ring a bell in a different way. And so it becomes a lovely community process, and what's really great about this is that if you print it off once a year, as Trish reads it and then Eileen reads it, Trish can put her synopsis and Eileen can put her synopsis, and then we're starting to get something that looks like the community reviews on Amazon. And I ate it all and the monkey got stuck to me, or whatever, But so it becomes a really viable option that goes beyond just you as an individual. And finally, the project report at the end. And again, this becomes, you're going to choose out of this whole presentation what's going to work for you guys and what's not. I would say that this final presentation, seeing that you are recording the brown bags, they just become part of your brown bag library. And that becomes your documentation, whatever support materials went with that, etc. But it gives you an opportunity to really tie what your employees are doing on an individual basis, or you as an entrepreneur are doing on an individual basis, to be able to give back to the Gangplank community with the Learning Loop piece. Now, if you are going to turn it over for third-party review, basically what we've done at the Center for Informal Learning is we've broken it down based on the philosophy that to be an expert you have to have 10,000 hours in something. and we have different categories of hours. So what happens is if you choose to want to be able to put it in, have a third-party validation source, you could come to us. Likewise, Gangplank could set up its own third-party validation source for this kind of informal learning. The key is to have more than one outside party validate that the work has been done. So if Eileen has done a journey and she's applied for the USTA level on a topic, which is one of the levels that we have, so it's kind of a mid-range level. And basically there's like a, USTA is the, and then we've got the polymath, which is the expert. So, and there are steps in between. But if you amassed this and you put it together and you submitted it to us, we'd have two or three individuals identifying one that was in the content area specialist that you had focused on. We'd go over your data for you. We'd say, yes, she evidently came to the AHA, she gets what she's talking about, and then we'd deliver you a certificate that you could then put on your resume that said I was USTA level in the Citizens Explorer program on this topic. And then we would validate that if an employer were to call. And likewise, like I said, Gangplank could do something similar. You could put together a community that would validate that. You could set your own levels and move forward with it from that piece. So that's the basics of the whole learning loop concept. We're excited to see it in play this year in several settings. We're using it in Buckeye Elementary with their arts teachers. We're using it at Liberty Elementary with their arts teachers. And I'm excited to be able to bring it to Gangplank, and hopefully a model, whatever you guys decide that model will be, can become a reflective process for your brown bag community. So, any questions?
Do you run into a lot of, I would imagine you do, but like how much like old curmudgeon-y do you run into when you're trying to bring this to somebody who is so old school? Or
Oh yeah.
I mean.
Oh yeah. There's no question about it. This is some innovative stuff. What we are excited to be able to do is pull out the research not from the United States. Internationally, the whole concept of documenting informal learning as an avenue for professional development and workforce development is something that's being well researched, especially in those countries where they don't have a high level of structure for the university systems. And so what happens is that we have that old school apprentice model. And how do you document that old school apprentice model? And what this is it's bringing the old school apprentice model documentation in some form back to entrepreneurs in our case. So the great thing about having, that's why we want that third-party validation, and to be able to with confidence say this wasn't just reviewed by the employee and his boss. An outside agency took a look at this. These are the credentials within that outside agency. And you know, so that you're able to say, these are the 3 people that reviewed, kind of like when you do your PhD and you have your review board. Those names go off on the, it's that kind of process.
So that third party sort of pats the head of a typical bureaucrat who would normally just take pride in the fact that they outsourced stuff or brought in an expert and then.
Exactly.
So it kind of bridges their ego so that.
And you know, and not every, I mean, you know, within your company, you might not need it. I mean, the reality is that you guys are on the forefront. I mean, this whole space is I mean, the poor gal that was, what do you mean this is free? What do you mean, you know? I mean, it's a whole different model. I saw the stirrings of this model on LinkedIn 10 years ago. And I can remember reading the articles and going, that's absolutely ridiculous. And where am I? I'm standing up here in front of you going, this is awesome. And so that change does take time. But again, as you move into different places, having that validation is going to support is going to support recognition of your learning. There is that third party, whether it be Gangplank internally or an external party, that they can call and they can say, what is this all about? What kind of vetting was done? How do we know this person really has these credentials? And that's what that piece and process is. Did it answer your question? Okay.
General educational philosophical question. It seems like there's a significant gap between occupying space and getting credit for it versus acquiring implementable skills.
Absolutely.
What up with that?
Well, from a philosophical standpoint, my philosophy is that we created our education system at the time of the Industrial Revolution, and the whole goal was for you to be trained to be a factory worker. And all of a sudden, we are now in an information economy, and it is a system that moves incredibly slow. And so the places that those gaps are being filled is places like Bonanza and other enrichment programs and volunteer volunteer clubs and
Industries, different industries place different emphasis on credentials versus measurable skills.
absolutely.
What are the
I think that it's always going to be a battle. In education, you notice that when, on my title card, my alphabet soup is there. Alphabet soup is everything in my space. I am in educational reform. I am trying to tell people to do things differently. By darn, I've got to tout that alphabet soup wherever I go. When I'm in the entrepreneurial space, you don't care that I have a master's degree in education, nor does my master's degree in education have anything to do with the film company I started, the nonprofit I mentor, or any of those kinds of things. You just want my list of clients. You want my white papers and my case studies. And that's the proof in the pudding. And what we need to figure out is how we do the white papers and the case studies for all of us so that we're not having to tap into that university system that's so expensive that isn't meeting our needs anyway. So we'll get there. I kind of figure by the time I'm a grandmother, my kids may actually be thinking on their own and not getting in trouble for it.
I loved your idea of the kind of reflection journal or blog. As far as documenting, I've kind of been playing a little bit, kind of in this space, and I think it's really interesting too. Pam Slim's most recent book is on body of work and how people are kind of starting to view all of their work together, and that same kind of idea of how you start documenting it, that you have this complete body of work. So I know your background is more traditionally working with schools. Have any of the students kept blogs that are public that you've worked with, or is that?
Absolutely. We're seeing it more and more. And in fact, this next week we'll be reviewing the new draft art standards for the state of Arizona with the teachers. And one of the things that we're seeing is we're beginning to see within the standards media arts is being included. Not just from a technical standpoint, but from using it for aesthetic and blogging and documenting with pictures and things like that. For me, the most exciting portfolios are not static. They're the artifacts that are in those portfolios really represent the breadth of learning. And one of the challenges that I have is even though I've got the alphabet soup and all of that, I have a master's in early childhood. I have an undergraduate in psychology. I have a minor in theater. None of it, and I run a film company and I mentor nonprofits. None of it seems like it ties together until you look at it as a body of work and begin to realize that the work that I'm doing is all in learning and informal learning and how we improve the systems of that. And it just doesn't matter what industry it's in. It's all in that same space. But you wouldn't know that without putting that body of work together.
Do you think this process is going to have an opportunity perhaps to make a dent in just this propensity for bureaucrats to make sure everything they do that's supposed to reform schools, it always turns out to be find a way to get kids to pass tests better. Like I just heard they're getting rid of Ames, replacing it with something else. And my wife, she's a public school teacher in Chandler, and she's just like, Yeah, pretty much one day I expect them just to come in and say, here's your handouts, read from the script, you know.
We were there 10 years ago. We'll get back there again. Yeah.
The same people who told us that
Yeah.
No Child Left Behind is going to be an awesome success are now telling us that this
Yeah.
thing's going to be a success. And apparently everyone had amnesia 3 years ago. But I'm hoping that it sounds like what you're doing may start influencing at least another generation.
I'm more excited, not about the work I'm doing influencing it, but honestly about what you take away from it and the conversations you begin to have. Because the reality is am I going to be able to change the curriculum the way it is in schools? No, sorry, it's not going to happen. I can fight and I'll be blue. And you know, one of the reasons why I love Arizona is because we are so far down at the bottom. I don't love us because we're there, but when I do quality improvement, I can see a measurable difference, and that's really good for me. If I were in Hawaii or New York, it wouldn't be that way. And so for the style of work that I do, that's very validating for me, and I really love it when I see that change. But what needs to happen is that businesses in Arizona need to come to recognize the quality of employee they need. And if the widget's bad going in, the widget's bad is coming out. And so it is, as you begin to adopt these innovative ideas that I want my people to think, and I want my people to be able to define their learning, and I want them to have that critical evaluation skill and those kinds of things. And the more we demand of that, what happens then is that the school system changes. And you know, and the thing is that we have to work in multiple spaces simultaneously. So we have to sit back and we have to recognize that, well, yes, I communicated to both of my children that not going to college was not an option. I'm standing here saying, not going to college is an option, and we can be really successful if we don't go to college, if we know how to teach ourselves. And you know, when my kids are older, I might have that conversation with them. You know, we're seeing things like Khan Academy. We're seeing universities that are providing all of their online content free. We're starting to move in that direction. We're starting to recognize that information is important, and having access to it and knowing how to use it is far more important than what it is.
Do you find that even within your own system, like say somebody's presenting, here's what I learned, that just the very act of doing that is too prone to upset other people's sacred cows and creates another realm of dynamic problems? Because it's like, it seems like whenever you want to share anything you're learning, there's always somebody else who's just adamantly in a different mindset, and they think they have no right, they have every right to not be upset or hear things they don't agree with, and then the next
Absolutely.
thing unravels.
One of my favorite activities, in doing this exploration, one of my favorite things to do is that we meet the people that want to learn where they want to learn. And so one of the things I do is I run the education track for Phoenix Comic-Con. Now what's really great about that is all my schools go, what do you mean there's a PD track at Phoenix Comic-Con? And I'm like, well, yeah. Well, you don't advertise it. No, we really don't. I mean, we kind of sort of do. But the reality is that I don't want the teacher that goes, oh, there's a conference I want to go to and it happens to be at Phoenix Comic-Con. I want the teacher that is dressed as Superman, who didn't even know there was training at Phoenix Comic-Con, who stumbles across it in the program book and goes, oh, those are my people. That's the place that I want that to be. Well, what happens when you bring those affinity groups together, those groups of like-minded individuals, is that there's a much higher tolerance for differences in opinion. So one of the things that we do as a culminating event every year that we do, you know, every time Pop Goes to the Classroom presents at a Comic-Con, is that on Sunday afternoon we do a panel called Utopian versus Dystopian Societies. And it has no structure. What do you think a utopian society is? What do you think a dystopian society is? Do we live in one? How do we know? And go for it. And what's really exciting about that is that they self-moderate them. They moderate themselves. A few years ago, we had a young man who was very much The only idea that is the right idea is my idea. And I don't know how to have a conversation. And we didn't know, because of course, he popped in for the hour. This isn't somebody anybody has a relationship with, or a majority of people don't. Whether or not he didn't know how to share ideas, or he didn't know how to be open to ideas, or if he really was that stuck.
Is this like one of those people that did enough talking for 6 people?
Exactly. It's why I like to be a presenter. and so, but watching the group gently guide him in modeling conversation. And so when you put affinity groups together, controversial ideas are okay, because the affinity group gets where you're coming from. We're here, we're all sitting here, and we've all got kind of a like-minded philosophy about shared workspace. I could say something controversial about shared workspace, and you would be fine with it. You could argue the other side of it, you could file it where you needed to, whatever, and that would be fine. Whereas if we were in a mixed group with people who were that curmudgeon, this is my linear. So part of this conversation is, from a learning standpoint, when we're doing the review for sharing new ideas, you have to make sure that you're in an open and accepting environment for that to happen. Now, if they're going to go on and become a trainer or a teacher, and yes, they have to be able to come up with, a supportive group is going to come back with negative questions as well to challenge the individual without not being supportive. There is another skill level, and for some people, maybe that's the PD they're doing, which is learning how to handle hostile groups and how to field that. But I think it's a different skill set. And I think when we begin to look at, validating one another's learning, I don't think the share component of that has to be in that space. Anything else? All right, I guess
You might be interested to know, I don't know how much it's still prevalent, but in other parts of the country, it's not like everybody in the world knows about Gangplank. There's other like in Michigan. Some friends of mine put me in a conference call. They were opening a co-working thing in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And literally everything we do here, they were saying on the conference call, it won't work. It doesn't work. It's been proven it won't work. Every time it's tried, it fails. And I'm just sitting there listening to this, just laughing to myself. Because literally at the end of it, really what they wanted to do, everyone wanted to have like some little fiefdom within this co-working space they were going to like socially dictate. And when I was trying to explain to them, no, when you let everyone alone, just have like a shared manifesto and let all the rest of the chips fall on the table, they were like, no, that never would. All right.
It was part of why I reached out to Trish when I realized she was with Gangplank, and she had facilitated a conference, and I'm like, she gets this. I got to talk to her about it. So, all right, I guess Jeremy, you're up.
Part of the reason why KellyAnn was invited to speak today was because after 5 years of doing brown bags every Wednesday, we're beginning to feel like we've exhausted some of the opportunities that are out there. And so we keep going out and looking for a new speaker to speak about a new subject that we haven't heard in 5 years. And it's becoming to a point where these topics are getting so far away from what the core business ideas and community ideas that are going on in the community are, that these speakers are standing up and they're not having a huge audience. They're coming and giving their afternoon, and they're not drawing us away from our work like they used to. And the reason why, if you go around the room and you ask, as I'm sure you all will nod your head, is because the learning has been lost in the Gangplank Brownbag, and it's turned more into a platform for somebody to come and share a fun idea, or share something that they care about. And that's a beautiful thing, except there's platforms all around the state, like Ignite, like TEDx, that allow that to happen and doesn't require people to give up part of their workday when they're, behind on work or whatever. So how can we add value back to the brown bag? And our intent in bringing KellyAnn up here is to encourage you all to start thinking about, what if in 2015 we don't do the traditional brown bag anymore? What if instead of doing an hour-long, anybody who wants to talk can talk, we take a half hour and we let somebody complete a learning loop? We let them pick a skill or their company get together and pick some skills that they're looking to learn to improve their business, and the brown bag on Wednesday becomes them sharing that idea, sharing what they learned. So it might be up on customer service, it might be on video production, it might be on something that very much applies to our businesses, so that it becomes worthwhile for us to take that half hour on Wednesday and listen. In a way, can we turn the brown bag back inward? In the coming weeks, I'm going to start going out and seeing looking for some people who would like to take those first opportunities in January to complete a learning loop and present and review a learning loop in January. And we want to see how the reception by the community is. So we're not really going to look for people out there in the wider community. We're going to look for people here who are part of Gangplank every day, who want to use this as an excuse to learn and share what they learn to make us all better. So think about that. We're going to talk more about it in the coming weeks. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again, KellyAnn.